Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brisbane City Council meeting of May 4th, 2017. Today we're having a special meeting, and we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please rise and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Please note for the record that all council members are present.
Thank you. Item 3, adoption of agenda.
Move adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Public hearing. Today we are considering the Brisbane Baylands planning applications, Baylands concept plans, Brisbane Baylands specific plan, case SP-01-06, general plan amendment, cases GP-01-06/GP-01-10, and related final environmental impact report. The specific topics this evening include land use, planning, aesthetics, housing and population, and related policy issues. Universal Paragon Corporation applicant. So I just want to note that we did have a study session this evening before this meeting, and we did have a chance for the council members to ask questions, and there will be a chance during this meeting for the public to give comment. So we'll start off with a staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Turn the presentation over to Lloyd Zola.
Tonight we talk about housing and related issues, land use, aesthetics, and so on. We'll start with land use. And the general plan, which is one of the documents that we're dealing with here, is the lead document for planning. It is the Constitution for Development policy. It provides guidance both at a citywide level and in the city of Brisbane. There is a section or a couple sub-areas dealing specifically with the Baylands. So the specific plans that have been proposed, zoning, site-specific development, are required to be consistent with the general plan. The city also has the authority under state law to amend the general plan, and so that is all part of what you as a council and the community is looking at. In the existing general plan, the large majority of, or the large area of the Baylands is designated trade, commercial, and planned development. Now what that means, it's a mix of commercial uses, including warehouse, distribution, office, retail, restaurants, and light industrial uses. Heavy commercial district is actually covering the existing Recology facility, and then the lagoon area, Tunnel Road, Sierra Point Parkway, and the rail line. So the lands adjacent to the lagoon are designated marsh, lagoon, and bayshore, which are intended for open space use. Now the general plan also identifies the maximum amount of development that could be placed on any one portion or any one site-specific development within the Baylands. And that is done with a term called floor area ratio, and I'll show that in a minute, which is the ratio of how many square feet of building compared to how many square feet of land area. So a floor area ratio of 1 means 43,000 an acre is 43,560 square feet of building and the same amount of land area. In the Baylands sub-area, which is the majority of the upland area, the maximum floor area ratio north of the creek is 4.8. Multi-story buildings, very, very intensive, high-intensity use. South of Visitation Creek, 2.4, also a very high density. The other requirement is that 25% of the land area be retained in either open space, meaning publicly owned, or open area, privately owned, and the lagoon area to be 100% retained in open space or open area. The Northeast Bayshore area, which is essentially Industrial Way, another very high floor area ratio, 2.0, and the Recology site, Beatty sub area up to 1. floor-area ratio. This is an example when we talk about floor-area ratio, what we mean. So a floor-area ratio of 1 on a 60,000 square foot site, you can get 60,000 square feet of building. So a one-story building covers the entire site, two-story building covering half the site, four-story building a quarter of the site. A floor area ratio of 2 is just double that amount, and that's just how it works. So you can see that floor area ratios of 2.4, 4.8, how intensive they would be. The general plan does not, however, establish a maximum amount of how much development you can have on the entirety of the Baylands. So one of the questions that was asked during the workshop earlier, or during the study session, was could we not, as a community, figure out the maximum amount of development on the Baylands simply by taking those floor area ratios, multiply them by the amount of land area, and there we are, that's how much the general plan would permit. The reason that can't be done is that the general plan says as a policy that the overall amount of development on the Baylands will be well below that permitted on individual sites. So the general plan is very clear. There is no intent of allowing every site to build out at its maximum. It also says very specifically that the holding capacity of the Baylands was not known at the time in 1994, and that a specific plan and environmental review would be done to essentially establish that maximum density overall for the Baylands, and that density, maximum amount of development in the Baylands would be established based on meeting level of service standards, essentially the roadway standards for traffic, how much water supply is available to the Baylands, and then also provision of adequate wastewater and drainage infrastructure. So that combination of meeting roadway standards, providing water, and providing infrastructure, that is how you would set, in review of a specific plan, the overall amount of development intensity allowable within the Baylands. That's the intent of the general plan. Now, the EIR, Environmental Impact Report for the general plan, done back in 1994, estimated, based on traffic studies that are now 20-something years old, that meeting the level of service standards and providing water supply would yield somewhere between 1 million square feet of development and 4.2 million square feet of development, depending on the kind of use. If it's all retail, very high traffic generation, 1 million square feet. If it's warehousing, very low traffic generation, 4.2 million square feet. So that was the anticipation, the estimate used in the EIR. Now, the other thing that was determined, and we talked about this when we talked about traffic, is that the environmental impact report and the traffic study done for the Baylands development, as it is now proposed, found that 14 out of 18 intersections around the Baylands cannot meet level of service standards due to background traffic. So even if there is no development on the Baylands, 14 of 18 intersections will not meet their level of service standards. So one of the issues that the Planning Commission struggled with, and one of the questions to you will be, as you go through your deliberations, is how do we reconcile policy that says meet our level of service standards, and that is how we'll set density for the Baylands, when background traffic, even with no development, exceeds those standards. Now, we have from the beginning and in the environmental impact report looked at the developer-sponsored plan, which is the application that is in front of, or applications in front of the city, the community-prepared plan, which is a scenario that was put together with a series of workshops, and then a development intensity that was added following those workshops to get a comparison, Planning Commission recommendation, and the existing general plan. Each one of those expresses a very different vision of what the Baylands would be in the future and what type of development and what it would look like as the Baylands are built out. So the developer-sponsored plan envisions a modern, high-intensity, mixed-use urban development with substantial urban open space, very focused on the transit, and the Bayshore train station. And with mixed use, a combination of employment generation and housing in close proximity to each other and to transit. The CPP scenarios, the community prepared plan, again, a modern, high intensity, but mixed use, meaning employment, shopping, and hotel as a destination with a combination of urban and natural open space. So a slightly different mix, but also fairly high density. The Planning Commission recommendation is for a lower intensity, still relatively high compared to what's on the Baylands today, but an urban environment with open space. And then the existing general plan is a low employment density employment center. When you look at land uses, the DSP scenarios, the applicant's plan, residential, commercial, office, the residential drops out in the community prepared plan. The Planning Commission's recommendation, very similar uses, but more research and development, a little bit less retail, less hotel, and renewable energy generation on the landfill. The existing general plan is that mix of commercial, office, R&D, and industrial to be determined in a specific plan. Density of development is very different. In all of these scenarios, the lagoon area, 135 acres proposed for open space. In the developer-sponsored plan, 4,400 dwelling units, about 7 million square feet of commercial office, and about 170 acres of open space, open area. In the CPP scenarios, the residential drops out, more open space, 8 million square feet of commercial office. In the Planning Commission recommendation, the residential use, again, is not there, but 1 to 2 million square foot net increase of building area, so about 1.5 to 2.5 million square feet and even more open space. Then in the existing general plan, as it exists today, no residential use, and the development intensity would be fixed as part of the specific plan review. As you look at, I had mentioned earlier the issues related to traffic generation, and there's different reactions and different approaches in each of these four scenarios to that traffic issue. In both the developer-sponsored plan and the community-prepared plan, those significant traffic impacts are seen as an inherent part of developing the Baylands. And so both of those scenarios, both the developer-sponsored plan and the community-prepared plan, focus on maximizing transit orientation, maximizing pedestrian use for travel within the Baylands, maximizing bicycle use. In the Planning Commission recommendation, among a lot of other reasons, the Planning Commission looked at, since it's inevitable there's going to be a series of significant unavoidable impacts related to traffic, that Planning Commission recommendation limits the amount of vehicular traffic being generated. And as we mentioned earlier, the existing general plan says meet the applicable LOS standards, level of service standards, but the 1994 general plan did not contemplate background traffic exceeding those standards, even with no development in the Baylands. Each of these scenarios has a different vision in relation to one of the issues we spent a lot of time talking about earlier, site remediation and landfill closure. The developer-sponsored plan is based on the belief that the former rail yard can be remediated to be safe for residential and non-residential use, that the landfill closure can be adequately accomplished to allow for high-intensity non-residential use. In the community-prepared plans, similar in terms of the landfill, that it can support high-intensity use, but that the rail yard could be remediated only for to be safe for non-residential use, that it wasn't certain regarding safety for residential use on the rail yard. The Planning Commission recommendation looks at the same in terms of the rail yard, that it can be remediated for limited non-residential use within the rail yard, but that it would be best to avoid large-scale buildings on the landfill, and therefore their recommendation was for renewable energy generation and open space within the landfill. The existing general plan relies on regulatory agency approval prior to reviewing development on the Baylands. I've mentioned residential use in a couple different scenarios. The developer-sponsored scenario looks at residential from this standpoint. The site will be adequately remediated. There is a critical need for housing in the Bay Area, and the location of the Baylands near transit, near the freeway, in a large configuration where there can be substantial amount of employment generating use is ideal for residential, and that's the reasoning behind that recommendation in that scenario. In the CPP scenarios, those were based on maintaining the existing general plan prohibition against housing, which is obviously the existing general plan. In the Planning Commission's recommendation, they looked at site remediation for housing within the rail yard might not be achieved for residential use, and that housing would be incompatible with adjacent uses such as recology. And one of the things that they looked at was the potential difficulty of getting school locations within the Baylands. If we're going to have a substantial amount of housing on the Baylands, there ought to be schools that go with that. And when you look at the state standards, as we talked about when we dealt with schools, that may or may not be achievable. And also there was a lot of discussion regarding the amount of housing being approved, and that is approved and will be approved within San Francisco. So again, 4 very different approaches to looking at housing and 4 very different reasons for their conclusions. In relation to renewable energy generation, within the applicant's proposal, the community prepared plan, rooftop solar generation, and a 19-acre solar farm, the Planning Commission's recommendation is for utility scale renewable energy on the landfill, in addition to rooftop solar energy. And in the existing general plan, that would be something you would review as part of the specific plan. Now, as in terms of land use, and as the Planning Commission built their land use recommendation, they looked at what are the key features of the Baylands that can be used to determine appropriate land use and development intensities. So one was looking at existing land uses, recology, and its function as solid waste management, the roundhouse need for restoration and desire for compatible uses adjacent, the Kinder Morgan tank farm and issues related to that, and then the machinery and equipment building, both Kinder Morgan and machinery and equipment building not being in the Baylands and not assessed in the EIR, but are adjacent land uses to be looked at as part of developing the Baylands. Looking at issues for environmental protection, preserving the lagoon, Ice House Hill, taking the existing creek, daylighting it, and it becoming a habitat within the Baylands. The Geneva Avenue extension and its effect on land uses and development intensity, as well as the potential for improvements to the Candlestick Interchange, the Caltrain line, as well as the Bayshore Station, and then proposals that go back to the city's open space plan when you looked at various open space concepts for the Baylands, realigning Lagoon Road to line up with the existing interchange and get a much more direct access to the freeway, as well as increase the buffer area between development and the lagoon. And then transit orientation, and what you see in the crosshatch is a half a mile from the Bayshore Station. Open space connectivity, having connected open space throughout the site rather than individual pieces. And one of the things the Planning Commission in their recommendation looked at was a shoreline setback and potential for a shoreline park, so that that would be open to the public to overlook the bay. So these are the key features that they looked at, and when you put that together for the Planning Commission, and we looked at 6 development areas that popped out. The area north of Geneva, both sides of the rail line, between Geneva Extension and the creek, both sides of the rail line, and then south of the creek, both sides of the rail line. And the interesting thing about this is those 6 development areas show up in every one of the scenarios and alternatives that have been looked at so far.
Lloyd,
Very
can I interrupt you for a second, Madam Mayor? We have some empty seats around, we're getting pretty full in here. Can folks raise their hand who has an empty seat next to them? So that way some folks could sit down? Because we can't be blocking the doors and stuff. So if there's an empty seat next to you, please raise your hand, and then maybe somebody could sit there. Thank you.
Thank you, Clark.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
No.
It's just,
I was thinking the same thing. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
But these 6 same development areas and these building blocks show up in all of the variations of development on the Baylands. And so in some cases they're shown for open space. We took these outlines and looked at the developer-sponsored plan, the entertainment variant, the community-prepared plan, and its ecology expansion variant, and then the renewable energy alternative, and they're all laid out kind of the same way with around the same features. And so this kind of concept of 6 different development areas is what the Planning Commission used initially to look at their land use recommendation. Aesthetics. This is an incredible site. You've got views of San Bruno Mountain. You have the creek as a visual feature, the roundhouse, the bay, the roundhouse in its restored version. But there are substantial and very important on-site scenic resources, the bay, San Bruno Mountain, as I mentioned. And the impacts in the environmental impact report are based on blocking views. So scenic vista, when views of either the bay or the mountain were blocked, those were identified as an impact. And the visual simulations were based on the maximum amount of development proposed. So basically, maximum height, maximum amount of development, minimum setbacks, and up to the maximum amount of development that was permitted in terms of square feet. Community character is another one of the issues addressed in the EIR. And community character is, I'll just say it, it's the most subjective issue in the EIR. Community character, as it's addressed in the EIR, makes the assumption that well-planned development would not be a significant impact, no matter if it's different or not different than the adjacent community. And that is because right now your zoning, your general plan, and your design review functions all include and all address compatibility with adjacent uses. So the outcome of any plan as it goes through your design review process would have to be compatible with the adjacent community. And so the environmental impact report does not conclude, it says the uses being proposed in the developer-sponsored plan are very different, but they are not a significant impact. Now, that's the environmental, that's CEQA. As you go through the planning review and make a decision on what do you see as the character of the Baylands, different becomes important. So that is part of the subjective decision and subjective determinations that you as a council will be asked to make is what is it that the community wants to see and what is your vision of the character of development that's there. Very high-rise, dense, individual buildings separated by open space, more mid-rise, or more campus-like with large areas of open space. And those are some of the various visions of the scenarios that are in front of you. Population and housing. There is a regional document called Plan Bay Area, and the derivation of Plan Bay Area is it's based on state laws that are aimed at reducing greenhouse gas statewide and achieving a major reduction in GHG emissions statewide. Each regional agency throughout the state is required to prepare what is called a sustainable community strategy. aimed at tying land use to transportation so as to reduce vehicle miles traveled and achieve statewide GHG reduction standards. Plan Bay Area for the 9-county Bay Area region is the sustainable community strategy. And it has projections of growth, it's based on projections of growth, and a land use pattern that would achieve those greenhouse gas reductions. And it's based on a couple principles. One, that growth should be in places with high levels of transit rather than the continuing suburban expansion that is so typical, more typical of Southern California, but you've seen out in the Bay Area going out into the East Bay. That housing should be distributed within the Bay Area so as to reduce the amount of vehicle miles traveled. And in the regional principle, that means two things. Housing should be near transit, and it should be near jobs, rather than large areas of suburban residential coming into the downtown areas for employment. And that housing growth should be linked to nearby job centers. Now, that is those are the regional principles. However, Plan Bay Area also has a very clear relationship to your local land use planning, which is you retain your local land use authority, and so you retain the authority to determine how the Baylands should fit within the context of regional goals. And one of those key regional goals that is looked at in the EIR is how can the Baylands contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and be consistent with achieving those statewide standards. These are the Plan Bay Area growth projections as they are now adopted. And what this shows is for the Baylands, the San Mateo County portion of what's called a priority development area. Those are those areas near transit that the regional plan is based on. The existing adopted Plan Bay Area projects an increase of just a couple hundred jobs and no housing. And this was based on their understanding at the time that Plan Bay Area was adopted that the city was in the middle of a land use decision. So this is the existing Plan Bay Area. Per state law, this is to be adopted or be updated every 4 years. And so there's an update going on right now, and I think there was a presentation at the City Council. And the proposed Plan Bay Area shows a very different projection. And so what this shows is within the PDA, Priority Development Area, essentially the Baylands, an increase over 30 years from 2010 to 2040 of 4,400 dwelling units within the Baylands, and an increase in employment of another, about 9,000 jobs. So very substantial amount of development being proposed in terms, or being projected in Plan Bay Area. The way that these numbers affect local planning is, one, they set a basis for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, which can be a separate analysis. And also under state law, the sustainable community strategy is used to define regional housing needs assessment. Now, housing elements updated every 8 years, Plan Bay Area updated every 4 years, so these numbers, even if adopted, will not be the basis of your housing element. There will be another update to Plan Bay Area before you would look at what are the regional growth projections that we as a community would need to accommodate. So Plan Bay Area will not govern, control, or override your local land use decisions. It will be updated again prior to 2022, but the 2021 update will set your housing objectives for your housing element update that will need to be done in 2022. And so Planning Commission recommendation is for a 1 to 2 million square feet net increase in existing building area, about 640,000 square feet there, to take the sustainability framework, incorporate that into the policies of the general plan. the series of basic land use principles, large unbroken blocks of open space, key habitat areas. We've talked about these. To incorporate an open space framework into the general plan that is this open space framework, as well as to look at, and this is part of the staff report also, 10 different planning areas and looking at the desirability of a Bayview Park, as well as creating buffers adjacent to the tank farm. And the Planning Commission has recommended individual uses for each of these areas: light industrial in the area of ecology and adjacent, renewable energy generation on the northern part of the landfill, recreation, public kind of recreation on the southern portion of the existing landfill, light industrial along Industrial Way, improving the existing buildings that are there, so something much more modern kind of business park. Area 5, looking at retail in and around the roundhouse, and something that would be play up the roundhouse and its rail usage. And there are some really interesting kinds of concepts that can be looked at there. And then adjacent to the Bayshore Station and along the rail line, looking at transit-oriented development, research and development, and a tech campus in that area. And then there's a couple areas, areas 7 and 8, that are not part of the Baylands. They're both shown as not a part of the specific plan proposal, but are included here because these are land uses around which other land uses will take place, and they are in fact included as part of the general plan for the Baylands sub-area. One is the area in and around the machinery and equipment yard, which could at some point become community garden, along with reuse of that building for community use, and then recognizing the location of the tank farm. And so with that, I'd be glad to take any questions, and then we're ready for the public hearing.
Thank you, Lloyd. Are there any council questions before we go to public comment?
No, I'd rather hear from the public first.
I'm ready to go for the
Okay.
public hearing.
Great. Well,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Thank you, Lloyd.
So, just want to thank everyone for coming out. I do know we have a full house today, and it's great to see so many people participating in the public process. So, we want to make sure we get to everyone. I have a number of slips. If you plan to speak, you can submit one to the city clerk, and I'll go in order in which they were received. You have 5 minutes each, and we do have a lighting system so that when the green light goes on, you can speak, and then yellow light is 1 minute remaining, and red light is when you'll need to wrap it up. So please do be respectful. And we'll start off with Greg Anderson.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, thank you so much for your efforts in examining this difficult issue. The land use decision on the Baylands is probably the most important thing that's going to be facing Brisbane for decades before and afterwards. During the study session, a question was brought up about the unusual nature of the distribution of density from the Planning Commission. And I wanted to point out that that was not an important aspect of the decision. It was more in keeping with the existing general plan alignments, and fine details of this plan are easily adjusted at the City Council level. The important parts of the Planning Commission recommendation is to do what we all want, a sane and rational development in the area. And as Lloyd mentioned, keeping the development density down does address traffic, but that was not the only reason. The main reason that we came in with the density that we did is that we wanted to come up with a plan that we could recommend that fit within the EIR that we had in front of us. And we felt that a higher density development required greater study because the existing EIR did not substantiate the plan. Also, unmitigated development isn't good. The existing DEIR and perhaps EIR plan for traffic was just to throw up our hands and say, oh, well, it's going to be terrible, so let's not mitigate it. BART had this problem. There's a great plan to build it out, but they waited. It became too expensive. We may never get the 1950s BART plan. We're now under great pressure to push the envelope of what we can do because there's a great need. So I want to talk a little bit about the great need. We know that there's a housing crisis. Some astute people in the audience have come forward to tell us about this. The housing crisis is sitting all over the place. 65 miles out from the Bay Area, there is a spike in homelessness because people moving out from this area are moving into there, and more housing is being developed, and the housing prices are going up. The rents have gone up from $900 to $1,600 since 2014, and new houses are running in the range of $350,000, which is out of the price range of people who live in that area. So the plan that some people have is just if everyone builds more housing, then things will become less expensive. But I ask, how many units would you have to approve in Turlock before the $350,000 housing price would go down enough to combat the housing problem there? And the answer is there is no number that would do that. Many people say it's a simple matter of supply and demand, but saying the supply of housing increases causes the price to go down is actually the opposite of what the Economics 101 supply and demand graph is trying to show you. And what that shows you is that supply increases as sales price increases. So we want to stop the sprawl of people going out to Turlock and commuting back in. So how many housing units would we have to approve in the Bay Area to compete with a $350,000 price in Turlock? And that's also a difficult problem because land costs more than that here. So again, simply approving is not going to do the trick. So I'd like you to remember the most important aspects of the Planning Commission recommendation. I've already touched on this a little bit. In the DEIR, the applicant said that they will use the best practices. I don't think that that is a sufficient level of study. The applicant has said that Sierra Point is similar to Area 6, but that was based on superficial observations. I think we need a better study to see to what extent it would accept the same level of density as Sierra Point or not. So there's two obvious things to do here. One is study Schleglock. During our deliberations, it was often said that we cannot provide more details because it's too early in the process. Schleg is much farther along in the process. We can take a look at what they've done, what protections are in place. I mentioned in the past, even a small earthquake could cause damage that would be unsustainable to the residents. What protections in place are for that in Schleglock? I mentioned in the past that Hunters Point is having staged release of sales so that housing prices won't go down when their housing units are built. Is Schleg going to plan to do that? How much are those units expected to cost? What are the details of remediation? Finally, the second obvious thing I think we could do is we could hire Dr. Fred Lee. He's studied this a lot, and he is well respected in the community. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't bring him in. It's kind of ridiculous when we just get answers like there's never been a problem and I don't know the answer. And I think that we'd get a much better study with with that source.
Thank you, Greg. Rachel Trigueros.
Good evening, council members. My name is Rochelle Trigueros, Policy Manager at the Bay Area Council. We are a nonprofit public policy advocacy organization representing about 300 of the Bay Area's largest employers. Housing and transportation have consistently been the council's top policy priorities. The Bay Area Council supports Universal Paragon Corporation's mixed-use development proposal. that would add over 4,000 housing units close to public transportation. The Bay Area is currently experiencing an unprecedented housing shortage that threatens our economy, equity, and environment. In 2015, the Bay Area added 133,000 jobs, but only 16,000 units of housing. San Mateo County specifically created 50,000 jobs since 2011, but only 3,000 units of housing. This jobs housing imbalance forces our residents to compete for a limited supply of housing and drives up cost. And this shouldn't be a contested thing. President Obama released the White House housing paper that said increased supply brings down costs for everybody. The California Housing and Community Development Department agrees with this. The Legislative Analyst's Office agrees with this. It shouldn't be something that we're arguing with anymore. When costs rise, our region's low-income residents suffer the most, as they have to pay upwards of 50% or more of their income to housing, or become displaced altogether. Lack of affordable housing also affects our environment, as working families are pushed out to the outskirts of the region to places like Manteca and Lathrop, where housing is cheaper but commutes are longer. Lastly, our inability to produce housing threatens our economy. We're already seeing signs of economic cooling, with January and February seeing job growth decline, and anecdotal evidence of companies choosing to expand outside of California. Brisbane's community prepared plan to add high-density commercial real estate, which would create over 10,000 jobs, but not a single unit of housing, is unacceptable. Baylands is a regionally significant site. Not only is it at the heart of the region, with a short commute to the jobs in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, but it's right next to regionally funded transportation infrastructure. You can't create 8 million square feet of commercial development and not share the housing obligation. In a recent report, the Bay Area Council Economic Institute found that expedited completion of major housing projects in San Francisco, or housing projects over 1,000 units, was the #1 driver for increased affordability in the city. So by building this housing project, Brisbane would not just be providing new homes to folks, but significantly releasing the pressure on existing housing stock, increasing overall affordability for all San Mateo residents. We urge you to consider the regional significance of this site and hope that you do your part for Bay Area residents. Thank you.
Thank you. David Crabb.
Honorable Mayor and members of the council, my name is David Crabb. I do not live in Brisbane, but I consider myself a resident of the region, and I think this is a regional scale issue that we have in front of us. I want to talk about the jobs housing balance situation, but I was looking at the Planning Commission proposal, and I think most of the people in this room would probably like the Planning Commission proposal in terms of the open space and the farm and so on, solar farm. The problem is 2 million square feet of commercial space. And the problem with that is that creates jobs, and those jobs are going to exacerbate the housing problem. And there's no counter to it. I'd be perfectly happy with that plan if it had the 2 million square feet of approximately of commercial and housing equal to maybe the 4,400 on from the Paragon project, which would balance the situation out a little bit. Because I guess what I'm asking is that please, Brisbane, do not exacerbate a problem that we already have. We're digging ourselves into a hole, and please don't keep digging. Thank you.
Thank you. Kanji Nishijima.
I'm Kanji Nishijima, 102 Monterey Street. As much as I hate speaking in front of people, I felt I had to speak up on this matter because I, as a Brisbane resident, had to push back against the bullying by the profit-hungry Universal Paragon and the housing advocates they've recruited for support. I, my wife, and my friends in Brisbane prefer to leave the Baylands as open space, as it is. But realistically, we feel the next best thing is supporting the Brisbane Planning Commission's resolution to reject Universal Paragon's plan and proposed amendment of the general plan to allow them to build over 4,000 homes on the Baylands. I understand the need for an increase in affordable housing, but increasing our total population in Brisbane by 200% would be a disaster for the current residents. And building homes on top of the Baylands toxic sludge would be, at worst, deadly, at best, seriously unhealthy for the owners and residents of those new homes. At least the Planning Commission's resolution will ensure necessary due diligence with whatever happens on the Baylands and positively contribute to fighting climate change with the renewable energy farm. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Ferreira.
Good evening, Mayor Liu, council members. My name is Mike Ferreira. I am the Conservation Chair for the Loma Prieta chapter of the Sierra Club. Well, our chapter encompasses the counties of San Mateo, Santa Clara, and San Benito. The Conservation Committee speaks to all such issues within those three counties. We did participate in your DEIR process. We also presented to the Planning Commission. The vote at our committee, with only one divergent vote, was to support the renewable energy plan in the Baylands. And I'm here tonight to reinforce that stand. I can also state that I'm a member of the three-chapter committee that deals especially with ABAG MTC. And I do recall the 2013 plan, and I do recall that the PDA for Brisbane was in there, and we had to get involved in trying to sort out just what that means. And so we did check with you, and we found out that there was no housing application from the city of Brisbane for that priority development area, because that would be a violation of your general plan. And PDAs are given on the basis of application from the city. It's not something that comes down from MTC. And so I am rather surprised to hear that MTC has decided to throw a quantity into the PDA that you did not apply for. And I don't quite know what that means. I do recall that they participated in a meeting in San Francisco at Spur, in which they were trying to promote large number there. But yet again, I still don't understand what looks like the effrontery of dictating a number to you for something that supposedly is within your discretion. We do need, the Sierra Club's a strong supporter of distributed generation. We think it's unique and highly desirable that Brisbane play a role in that, especially now that we have an established omni-jurisdictional CCA for this county, all right, to supply renewable energy to everyone in the county at their option. And so a big part of this CCA, CCE is to get distributed generation, local generation of power. That is a big factor. We strongly support it, and we would hope that you would too. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Ebel.
My slip-in's so late. I thought I was going to be at the very end. I just grabbed two pages out of here out of my DEIR. Where was it? Oh, so housing advocates come up here and they quote this figure from 2011 to present about how out of balance the housing and jobs ratio is. And that is true if you look from 2010 onward or 2011 onward. Right here in the DEIR, it says between 2000 and 2010, the relative increase in population and housing across the 9-county region shifted. Population grew by 5% and the housing units by 9%. We went into 2011 with a housing surplus. So because of supply and demand, you would expect housing development to be below population and increase for the period 2011 to now. I'm probably going to be shot when I leave this room, but we have another figure here is the number of housing units built and the number of people who've moved to the Bay Area. If you divide those numbers, that's 2.8 people per unit, which is down from the historical 2.9. So actually, there are enough housing units being built in the Bay Area. They're not always where people want them to be. And they're not, and the main issue though, I think, is they're not, and what's keeping the price up is they're not the kind that people want to be. I'm going to go anecdotal here for a second. I manage some building in this area. I had a 1-bedroom. I showed it for one day. I had 50 people come through. Okay. I had a 3-bedroom. It was about a third the price when you looked at on a per bedroom basis. Much, much cheaper. I showed it for 6 weeks. Had 3 applications. So, and I hear all these millennials say they want to live by themselves. The problem is that we're building in San Mateo 4,000, 5,000 square foot houses, and those are not affordable to the young people here in this room. We need small units, 1 bedroom, little condos, whatever, so that these people can buy the homes that they want. And I really, 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 really believe that their problems are real, but their problems are not the number of units. Their problems are the types of units that are being built. I agree with what somebody said here. If we add commercial to the Baylands, those places, people are not going to have houses. Well, you know, from my perspective, that's a vote to just turn the whole Baylands into solar panels. Done. Thanks.
Thank you. Sarah Ryan.
Hi, Madam Mayor and Council. I'm here representing Local Union 718, Glazers Union, and I'm an apprentice. And one thing I hear a lot tonight is talking about affordable housing and families moving in and coming in. Affordable housing is very important. What's also extremely important is for families to be able to make enough money to live in this awesome area that we have. Prevailing wage is extremely important when you're looking on who you're going to hire to hopefully build these units that you want, or whoever wants them. Prevailing wage allows us to stay in this area. Between me and my husband, we have 3 teenagers. We're both union workers. We're both apprentices. Non-union apprentices who are on our same level earn between $10 and $12 an hour, where we earn respectively $20 and $25 an hour. We're able to support our 3 teenagers. We have them in local schools. You know, we entertain them all over the Bay Area. We're able to afford to stay in the Bay Area regardless of how crazy expensive it's gotten here. I do feel that there's a huge shortage of family housing in the Bay Area, and it would be great if there would be more things that young families like us could afford. I think, and I hope, I assume that my brothers behind me would probably agree with me that the money we make is so much better than our non-union counterparts. The benefits that are afforded to us make it possible for us to have quality of life, which is like a Bay Area mantra. Quality. Everybody talks about quality of life around here. But if you're not making enough money to be able to support your family for like a young dad who, he just had his first baby. His wife can actually stay home and take care of that baby rather than her having to stress herself out and be like, oh my God, I got to go back to work in a few months. I'm fortunate. My kids are teenagers, so I go to work all the time and they don't care. They're happy to have me gone. but it's a huge benefit for us to earn that prevailing wage. And the more you hire prevailing wage workers, the more non-union and the more companies who do not pay prevailing wage will kind of be forced, because they'll see, all these people are hiring prevailing wage, all these people are hiring union, we're going to have to step up our game. Go union, go prevailing wage, because that's where all the skilled workers are going. That's where all the smart people are going. That's where all the people who, hey, I want to make that money. I want to work that hard. And we produce quality work. I myself am a 46% apprentice, which is very new. But I have been in the construction business and landscaping business and home improvement and all that for many, many years. I grew up in the construction business. And even working that hard for my whole life, I'm 36 years old now, I have lived in homeless shelters. I have lived in low-income housing, but I don't have to anymore because I'm making this money now. We have a nice house. We got our 3 kids. We got a dog. We have the life. That's the American dream, is to have that solid, secure life. And prevailing wage gives us that. So on my behalf and on behalf of my brothers, I would ask you to please hire prevailing wage workers, union workers, to build your projects. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anya Miller.
Madam Mayor, Council, as you know, I'm have been involved with the EIR study and also in Committee for Renewable Energy in the Baylands for quite a few years now. And we are just really, really happy that the Planning Commission has heard us, and hope that you will also hear us to support the Planning Commission recommendation that was done through we consider that Planning Commission recommendation a good start for your planning for the Baylands. Just a start at the general plan level, where you sort of get the handle on what the general plan is and what it might have to be. But there are so many open things still remaining that you can't possibly finish this issue now, and there's no point at all in trying to rush it, because there's so many indefinite developments are coming. We all know are coming, that they require further planning, further EIRs, before you can really finish any definite plan. You can do a general plan concept, but you need to deal with the ecology expansion. They are going to have to expand. They're going to have to do something. So they have already tried once to expand into the Baylands, but then they withdrew because of whatever the reason, probably land values. And then there's a high-speed rail project that exists, and the Caltrain electrification has just been funded again. That will be part of the high-speed rail, which is a real environmental leadership for this state. Even though it, of course, is not without problems, and they want their rail yard in Brisbane. We know that. They have 2 possible sites they're looking at. Their EIR is coming out, I think, later this year. So you're going to have to deal with the high-speed rail, whether any of us want it or not, and I don't think anybody really wants it. But they have eminent domain, they can come and do their rail yard if they want it here, and they do want it here. So you have to wait to see what is going to happen. And of course the high-speed rail people have said, your solar farm can go on top of the rail yard, same acreage. That would relieve everybody dealing with solar. Put it on top of the high-speed rail and let them pay for it. So, you have all these wonderful, really opportunities here that should make you just step back, do the basic concepts, and put it there and get back to the Planning Commission for further planning. And of course, we have other things, as sea level rise. Did you look at the study that they've done on San Mateo County shorelines? What happens? They're very interesting studies of all sorts of different places up to the Colma Creek in South San Francisco and some sewage plant there. Not a thing about Brisbane's shoreline. We're totally ignored in the county's sea level rise plan. So you're going to have to hear more about that. And then they're talking about 101 has to move inland because of sea level rise. Well, where is it going to go? It's going to go on the baylands. This issue has to be looked at. You can't just make a decision and say that such and such. So then there's a cumulative. I think I'll take another slip to talk about the cumulative impacts. That's just a related policy issue under your agenda tonight. On the sustainability, I would say, is another day spent on behalf of the developer so he can describe how sustainable this massive plan can be. You are responsible for the sustainability of our lives here in Brisbane. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. James Rui Gomez.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Honorable City Council members, and hardworking city staff. My name is James Gomez, and I'm here representing the San Mateo County Building and Construction Trade Council. Our Building Trade Council is comprised of 26 affiliated local unions with approximately 16,000 highly skilled men and women on the job site. Many of these members are here tonight. I'd like to ask them to rise and stay standing while I speak on their behalf. Like my sister spoke before me, our platform's quite simple. Make a decent wage that you can live on in this county. Our employers provide health care, maybe something to retire on, and the best training that they pay for, which I'll speak about later. Universal Paragon has made a commitment to these workers to build this project 100% union. Tonight I'd like to talk about community. And the difference between local and regional, and how local towns and several local cities make up this peninsula. One of the best counties to live in. This peninsula is a community. I've read a lot of letters in regards to the Brisbane Badlands on the city website. Several of the residents that live here in Brisbane talk about outsiders. For the sake of this discussion, let's call Brisbane residents insiders, and others like myself and these people standing outsiders, even though some of them live here. That's what Brisbane residents have written in the letters that are on file that I have read. I don't live in Brisbane. However, I live in San Mateo County community. That makes me a member, and the members standing insiders of the county community. I think it's very important that local city councils and citizens of the community have input as to what happens in their cities, and I know a lot of cities are concerned. Our citizens are concerned with legislation that was proposed last year that takes away local controls. This legislation speeds up the process when builders propose a project. This legislation calls out for more housing to be built. This legislation was called by right, but was not signed by the governor, didn't even make it out of committee. This might surface again in upcoming years. This project has been discussed for more than 14 years. One of the first speeches I seen in my predecessor's files was in 2003 when he came and spoke in front of prior city councils. It is important that local governments review the process and get the process finished in a timely fashion, so that way our building trade members can start building homes for the workers that are coming to our cities. Building in transportation corridors will cut down commute times. Cutting down commute times will help our environment by minimizing greenhouse gases. Then some outsiders can become insiders and enjoy what so many Brisbane residents are enjoying. San Francisco is building 11,000 homes on the old naval shipyard. If that land could be cleaned for housing, then this land can be as well. I don't feel like an outsider. I've grown up in San Mateo County all my life, and I represent workers that live here in this county. When I went to high school in South San Francisco, El Camino, class of '85, I attended high school with kids from Brisbane. Your kids from this community can go to Jefferson or transfer to attend other schools throughout San Mateo County. I believe that makes Brisbane dependent on the surrounding communities in San Mateo County. Now Brisbane has an opportunity to help its county community by building housing. We are all aware of the jobs to housing imbalance. We want to build this project with our highly skilled men and women of the trades. These workers are part of the largest privately funded educational system in the U.S. This educational system is our apprenticeship programs. They are privately funded and ensure that we have a future skilled workforce. So the developments that we build for your community will make Brisbane residents proud. These developments will be here for generations to come. We stand in support of Universal Paragon's Brisbane Baylands development. We are ready to build this fabulous community that Brisbane residents will be proud of. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you. Dana Dilworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. I've called this Legacy Land Use and Limitations. The question of land use on the Baylands cannot be done devoid of health and safety and public trust considerations. We appreciate the thoroughness of the Planning Commission's deliberation, whose decision to limit densities, prohibit housing, and accept the environmentally preferred alternative of renewable energy generation as the right decision for Brisbane. End of story. The only question you need to answer is, when a catastrophic event happens, how many people will be present? In spite of the Baylands appearing to be an attractive, transit-rich zone, the Baylands are not lands. They are not even engineered fill. The north end is toxic waste that has been smeared around to off-gas to a commercial-grade cleanup level, not residential. Through the magic of guesstimate science called risk assessments and risks you may not want to take, someone in a cubicle overseas can crunch some numbers and say that it's safe to live here. Cliff, I am sorry that soccer was more important than sitting through BBCAG meetings where we had discussions of risk assessments and how all the tests and assumptions done for the Baylands have been done for industry commercial standards. Please read the documents. Lori, I'm sorry your chamber work excused you from BBCAG meetings where we learned the difference between engineered and pre-CERCLA unregulated landfills. Particularly with an oncologist in the family, I would think you would be more concerned about uses and the future of the polytoxic high school. Rather than having snow days, we could be known for burn-off days. Did you go through the list? Earthquake, storm surge, tank farm explosion, ruptured jet fuel lines, train derailment, accident at Recology? Pile driver hitting a pocket of volatile gases. Where are the safe places to be on the Baylands? Have you reviewed Fukushima liquefaction videos? Because I think that was a turning point for the Planning Commission and should be too for all the people promoting housing on the Baylands. Look at what unengineered fill looks like with an earthquake, with liquefaction rising up through the so-called containment. I would approach land use with what's in the public's interest first. Transportation, yes, but in the form of high-speed rail, and to specify east of the rail lines, not the roundhouse, because of the cultural and environmental sensitivity. Renewable energy, yes, and I agree with Barbara. If 100 acres of renewable energy are good, 300 might even be better. That hasn't been considered. Language in the document suggests that phasing and substitution of uses and densities. Do not do this piecemeal. Cleanup should come first, infrastructure second. If we have solid, clean soils, then we discuss housing. San Francisco has an entire ordinance, the Maher Ordinance, in their health code to get areas cleaned up. But San Francisco also has an entire departments of qualified environmental and public health officials. But even with that, we are uncertain as to whether Hunters Point spoils are currently Brisbane spoils. We have no idea where some of the remediation from Hunters Point has gone. It is no longer part of anybody's record. So should we take the risk? Come on down and live on the Baylands. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Sean Hurt.
Hi, my name is Sean Hurt. I'm a local 104 union sheet metal worker. I'm an apprentice, and I'm a lifelong resident in Brisbane. I've been living here for 18 years, and I'm here to help show my support for the Bayland projects, because I would love to be able to give back to my community and be able to work in a hometown, or work on the project in my hometown. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. Deb Horn.
Hi, Deb Horn, Brisbane resident. And thank you once again, Mayor and City Council members, for your service. And thank you to everyone behind me filling this house and doing your civic duty. It's really an inspiration, your participation, whether I agree or disagree with you. Before I start my prepared remarks, I wanted to just clarify to the group here that the Brisbane Community Plan was not put forward by the citizens of Brisbane. It was put forward by UPC. It is their second plan. It is not the community-inspired plan.
There will be a chance for...
There'll be a chance.
Other public...
So, anyway, what I wanted to say is most people live or move to Brisbane because they do not want to live in San Francisco. These days, San Francisco believes in growth at any cost. While San Francisco is literally choking on uncontrolled construction, there is a demand for even more. There are 25,000 plus housing units approved just north of Brisbane, with infill in every vacant lot all over the city. They keep building with absolutely no consideration for the necessary infrastructure. San Francisco's public transportation systems are bursting at the seams and on the brink of collapse. The streets are overwhelmed with traffic, making it nearly impossible to get anywhere. At some point, quality of life needs to be considered, not just the housing shortage as a means to enrich the development industry. We are not getting affordable housing, my friends. In Brisbane, we believe in growth. Just this year, we're moving forward a housing plan for 232 new homes, several of them affordable. This is housing that addresses our share of housing, the housing element growth, in accordance with the state's mandates that are proportional to each municipality. In Brisbane, we also believe in the health and well-being of our citizens and the planet we depend upon. I don't deny that today the region has affordable housing needs. There are empty luxury homes in San Francisco. These proposed 4,400 homes will not solve the affordability crisis. Our planet's also in peril, and it's following an alarming spiral of climate change that will make it impossible for most living species to survive, including us. We have more dire problems than a housing shortage. Brisbane and UPC can make a profitable and significant regional contribution to the mitigation of climate change well into the future. Brisbane has a legacy of questioning quick fixes and looking for longer-term solutions. Our small town prevailed over the forces that wanted to lop off San Bruno Mountain and make it a sea of condos. Environmentalists and activists knew then the value of open space, saving species near extinction, and healing our ailing ecosystem. It's in the spirit of well-being of the planet and the people that many Brisbane residents do not feel that the Baylands, this incredibly toxic land, and plans to cap it, not clean it, is a safe place to raise children or live on. The toxins will not be removed. This is mostly landfill, and all of it a liquefaction zone. A moderate earthquake, sea rise, or severe storms will allow these toxins to escape the cap and bubble to the surface. Our scientists have given us assurances that this will not happen, and our UPC paid experts have suggested that Brisbane buy liability insurance. Have we seen those insurance bids? I wonder if an insurer will cover these events and consequences of underground toxins surfacing. This is land that cannot house a school, a daycare center, or have trees because their roots can pierce the cap. Safe housing on this land is magical thinking. Do you want to be accountable for the risks to the human lives? There's other reasons besides health and human safety that make UPC's two plans unattainable. Not enough CEQA-required water, not specific enough plans, traffic impact, lack of schools, infrastructure, etc. And yet there's so many innovative and profitable uses for this land. We've discussed utility-scale solar. We've discussed that can generate enough renewable energy for a large portion of our region that is a profitable venture. Think of the synergies with the co-located PG&E substation. Other than courting housing advocates, has UPC courted other profitable ventures that would love to have access to a flat, large space right in the middle of the most innovative entrepreneurial hub in this country? Let's look to a long-term solution. Brisbane has always been forward-thinking, visionaries at the forefront on land use that is safe and contributes to the triple bottom line. Good for people, good for the planet, and profitable. We'd like to see the land put to good use. And I'm left with the question, why have the hearings devolved into a housing battle? It seems past time to reframe the conversation and pursue profitable, visionary solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Clara Johnson.
Good evening, Clara Johnson. A hearing, a listening, a longing for a decision that favors the interest of the people, the desires of the people, over the interests of the moneyed, since money talks, we who lack it struggle to be heard. The 10 million, 8 million, 7 million square feet smother the mudflats and wetlands that underlie it. The traffic from thousands and thousands of new car trips make life stand still for people who can't go home and can't make it to work. For those whose businesses stall for lack of movement on the roads, there is no balance here. There is no sustaining such an overblown folly. stuffed into a town of 4,000 souls, shaken by the prospect of loss of peace of mind, lost time from their families, and less clean air to breathe, because someone wants to make more money. Benefit? What benefit derives from proposed ruination to come? There is no overriding consideration. If it is the land and the people who are being considered, the risk to plants and animals, including us, the risk of calamities, the everyday suffering, the banality of the proposed building design with its soul-deadening quality, all converge at the place where we realize this project must be stopped. The environmentally superior choice is the renewable energy alternative, the Planning Commission choice. There is no other rational alternative if you value your health and the health of others. If you value your time and your peace of mind, if you value your town and the land it occupies, the dozens and dozens of chemical constituents of concern that lie in and on this land shouldn't be allowed by some miscalculation to take the vitality of infants and children to satisfy greed and ego. Look into your heart and mind and tell me that isn't so. Thanks.
Thank you, Clara. Todd, David.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Todd David. I'm the Executive Director for San Francisco Housing Action Coalition. And as I stand here and I listen to the to public comment, I'm reminded of something that my old boss, Senator Scott Wiener, would say. He would say, everyone's allowed their own set of opinion, but not everyone is allowed their own individual set of facts. And that, while people certainly are allowed to have their opinion on whether they think this is a good plan or a bad plan, saying things like adding supply does not bring down prices is economically inaccurate. In San Francisco alone, over the past 20 years, we've added approximately 1,500 units of housing. And during that time, the cost of housing has gone up. In 2016 alone, we added about 4,500 units of housing. Guess what's happening to rents right now? They're coming down about 10%. So guess what? Supply does bring down prices when you add enough supply to the market. It is factually inaccurate to say otherwise. Economics 101. This California Sierra Club, the California chapter of the Sierra Club, 100% supports high-density housing with easy access to public transportation. So when local Sierra Club chapters say that they don't support density housing, they are not being consistent with what the state Sierra Club supports. And the state Sierra Club recently sent a letter to the San Francisco Sierra Club criticizing them for not supporting high-density housing in San Francisco. So I just want to say that I want to thank you guys for this. Has been a really, really difficult process for you, and I really want to thank you for continuing to engage on this issue. It's an incredibly important issue. Make no mistake, the options you have in front of you is truly a once-in-a-generation opportunity. It is 4,400 units of potential housing that can be incredibly, transportation friendly. That does not happen. I live in Noe Valley. I have 3 children, public school kids, and I would not come here and ask you to do anything that I'm not asking my own community to do. We need to add more housing. People need places to live in Noe Valley, in the Bay Area. And I think about my 3 children. Where are they going to live in 20 years? How are they ever going to afford to come back to the Bay Area? So I really I wish I was as eloquent as the one who spoke from the Bay Area Council and the gentleman who spoke from the San Mateo trades union tonight. They were awesome. Their comments were right on. We really need to start thinking about, we are a community, the Bay Area. This is not one community's issue, it's all of ours. And when we say that 4,400 units is not going to solve the affordability crisis, that's right. But 4,400 units by 100 different municipalities, we will start putting a dent in it. So if we say that it's their responsibility, not ours, then we're kicking the can to somebody else. We're not taking our responsibility. San Francisco, and I was amazed to hear that San Francisco is building a tremendous amount of housing. That is, everywhere. I think a lot of people in the room would be really surprised to hear that. Like we are advocating for 5,000 units a year for the next 20 years, just to keep the cost of housing in San Francisco to maintain at inflation. So I want to thank you again for really continuing to engage on this issue. We are your partners in this. We really want, we want there to be strong community and strong relationships all throughout the peninsula. And we hope that you come up with a really great decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michael Clausen. Apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly. I tried.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name is Michael Clausen. I'm a sustainable energy consultant. I live in southern San Mateo County. And I'm here to encourage you to devote some portion of the Baylands to siting a utility-scale renewable energy installation. And I say some portion because I think obviously you have mixed-use potential here. And I've learned a lot just by sitting here in the room tonight and listening to both the challenges and the opportunities that are confronting you this evening. It's a large site. Parts of it are obviously heavily contaminated. Now, one of the interesting things about solar is it can be co-located with other sorts of development. It can be on top of large flat roof buildings. It can be over parking lots. There's also potential for wind on this side. I've been nearly blown off Highway 101 some evenings driving home. Of course, these have to be involved also with energy storage, and there have been some big advances in energy storage. One of the things we have to realize and remember is that all of this construction involved in producing a utility scale facility would also create good jobs. And that's very important. There's a growing demand for renewable energy that is generated locally, and that's been mentioned earlier this evening. Within the next 3 or 4 years, I predict that the 2 local community choice energy programs, Peninsula Clean Energy in San Mateo County, to which Brisbane belongs, and Clean Power San Francisco, both will be looking for locally sourced renewable energy facilities to diversify their portfolio. This is a natural place for that. The other thing that's important to mention, you do have some real environmental challenges here. And contamination is less, you can remediate the site to a lesser degree for a renewable energy facility than when you get involved in housing. Frankly, the other thing that concerns me about housing, although I hope it can be part of your mixed-use development, is I'm concerned about the liquefaction around earthquakes. I'm concerned about the toxic contamination. I'm also concerned about the potential of sea level rise. So you have some real challenges here. But I know that I think people are really of goodwill. They want to see this site, and fortunately it's large enough that it can be used for various purposes. But I think a renewable energy facility located on the Bayland site would be a very attractive source of clean energy for energy providers. So in conclusion, I strongly encourage you to take advantage of the site's potential and the growing demand for carbon-free energy to include a renewable energy installation in your plans for the Baylands. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Detmer.
My name is Bill Detmer. I live in town. I do maintenance. I'm non-union, guys, but I say hire non-union. It might be done right the third time. So that was this whole thing. The Baylands project with all my friends is highly unpopular. I know about 2 people in this town that I've just brought it up with. One guy, my neighbor, I said, hey, what do you think about this Baylands project thing? And he says, hey, we need housing. People need housing. One person out of 100 would say that. But I work in maintenance, and I see how people live. I see what they pay. I see a lady that pays $1,100 for 200 square feet, and she's happy. I was working in an apartment, and this guy came in with his wife. He got a job at the airport, and it's $1,750, and for 250 square feet. And he said, I have to continue commuting from Richmond to the airport. And I see the cost to people, the monetary and the time cost of a housing shortage. So I support housing. I support housing on the Baylands, on the old train yard, and I support the project. I see the pain. So I support the Baylands project with the exception of I feel it's not the place for solar panel farms or windmills or anything like that. The land is far too valuable. And, it seems to me that we'd much rather look at, Baylands or, anything than that. I don't think they look good. And besides, there's better places to put them. This is the Geneva Fog Gap, by the way. I don't feel it's right to ask a property owner to do something that does not make sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Tim Collin.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Tim Colin, and I'm speaking on behalf of the San Francisco Housing Action Coalition. I've spoken to you before on a variety of topics with regard to the Baylands project, and I'm delighted that we're finally talking about land use, which is really the foundation of what's going to become of this site. In your work, you cannot be unaware of the grave challenges that the state of California is facing that are also related to land use. And chief among those is the housing crisis. The state's economy, of which Brisbane is a part, is at increasing risk because of the severe shortage of housing for our workforce and our middle class. I've learned that Google, you've heard about the Google buses in San Francisco, I'm sure the controversy about them. Google is running shuttle buses east of Sacramento. Lawrence Livermore Labs is running shuttle buses to Chico because that's what it takes to find workers that can afford to work in the knowledge economy in Silicon Valley, the best jobs that we have in the country. These are signs of a state economy that's badly out of balance. There's a sharpening discussion statewide, in particular in the state capital, going on at this very day, at this very time, about our shared responsibility to change our region's long-standing land use patterns in ways that will solve these problems and not make them worse. There is increasing focus on strengthening regional planning. The Brisbane Baylands project will be closely examined by the MTC ABAG organization as well as state legislators for its compliance with the land use goals being developed for the entire Bay Area under the Bay Area plan that you just heard reference to tonight. I also want to commend your excellent planner and planning department and his reference made to the Sustainable Communities Strategy, the SCS. That is going to be part of your business. You're going to have to look very closely at how that's evolving and how your preferred alternative will conform with that. Brisbane has identified this area as a priority development area, perhaps not realizing the expectations that come with it. It is not likely that your preferred alternative will be looked on favorably unless it advances the Plan Bay Area goals, and that is efficiently using available land to bring high-density housing and jobs close together and integrating it with transit. The state is moving quickly away from LOS, you've heard references to that, towards VMT, the level of service to vehicle miles traveled. An easy back-of-the-envelope comparison between the preferred alternative of the city and the developer alternative show very different projects in terms of what it does to advance our environmental goals. You must be aware of that. With regard to the landfill, the remediation of the landfill, I was trained as a geologist and worked 25 years, 10 of them with an environmental consulting company as a contractor to US EPA, and in that capacity worked on remediation of dozens of sites, taking old industrial land and through modern science and technology and under strict regulatory oversight of state agencies, putting that land back into productive use. That's been done dozens of times around the Bay Area, taking old industrial land and putting it into better use. this is an absolutely routine site, and in fact, it's being done right across the county line at Schlegel Lock. You've had excellent presentations from your planning department and an environmental consultant that factually laid out what the circumstances of this site are, and that it would be under the strict supervision of the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. They have decades of experience in overseeing remediation of land, putting it back into productive use, and protecting the residents that live in the area. There's no reason it couldn't be done here. It's not worth even discussing because it happens so frequently and it's so routine. If land use is the foundation of the Brisbane Baylands site, global climate change is the foundation of land use. You're a small city on the San Francisco Bay. It's pretty certain at some point in the future you're going to be spending a pretty penny to address the results of sea level rise. And I can't understand why that shouldn't be this thinking that we need to change our behavior to address the very, very serious challenges we're facing. Doesn't think globally, act locally. You're acting locally in what you decide to do with this land in a way that advances our environmental goals. And that's putting it to use in ways that reduce our carbon footprint, which is necessary for the planet's survival. You must think globally and act locally. And I don't want to minimize the challenge you face in making a decision on what this site will become. But you're going to have to start aligning your thinking with what's going on outside, and certainly in the state capitol, and addressing the serious challenges that we face. Thank you.
Thank you. Danny Ames.
Thank you, Honorable City Council, Mayor. Appreciate your time. I've included attachments, supporting documents, links. By the way, did you see the NBC Bay Area investigative news report that I sent you guys? The one that talks about Tetra Tech and how their soil has disappeared with higher levels of radiation. And I reached out to them to find out where they delivered that soil, and I still can't figure out where it's gone. Anyhow, I want to talk about Visitation Valley, Schlegel Lock, Candlestick Point, Hunters Point already has approved developments that includes 10,500 dwellings, 3.64 million square feet of commercial space. This is huge and will have unknown impacts on the infrastructure that borders Brisbane. No discussion has taken place on this topic and must happen now. With no traffic studies forthcoming to date on what this extra spillover of people will have on the border of the adjacent roadways and transportation systems in Brisbane, I would like to have the City Council members discuss this before deliberations on the Baylands. Now, all this might sound great, but let's give this explosion in job growth and regional housing responsibility a reality check. As I have publicly commented before City Council members, it was San Francisco Mayor Ed Lee whom cut the corporate tax rates without a realistic housing plan to absorb these new tech workers, who now compete for living spaces, causing rents and property values to skyrocket in San Francisco County. Why should we put at risk diluting our little town's political strengths, our infrastructures, our quality of life, our open spaces to enrich the coffers of a few developers who want to make bank on San Francisco's less than responsible housing planning? The risk of speculating on land that was once just bay water and aquatic life that is now filled with decades of undocumented and known dumped toxics that will now face 10 feet of sea rise by 2097 and unknown chemical leaching issues revealed by the DEIR shall not be on the local Brisbane community. We have seen contractors botch the cleanup efforts at Hunters Point, a known Superfund toxic military site. These issues must be considered before you deliberate. A.T. Kearney, a global management consulting firm, rates San Francisco as the city with the most potential worldwide to be booming until 2024. So this is going to be an issue. I urged and reminded you guys in a letter earlier about Bayland's solar potential, that Brisbane even commissioned some of these reports. We've had many discussions on the positive impacts of solar in the Baylands. I want to add it will be reducing PG&E's grid demand on the saturated power lines. Thank God for solar, because those power lines would not be able to handle the new energy demands, and you can talk to PG&E about that. That power corridor that runs up the peninsula at near capacity to feed the needs of consumers like us. I say with solar energy transmissions from the Baylands tied near the Geneva, Maine PG&E substation is a win-win deal, especially with San Francisco Clean Power customers aggregating this pent-up demand for renewable energy. Learn more about the botched cleanup remediation work, where that highly toxic soil from Hunter's Point ended up where we do not know. I'd like to actually subpoena the drivers to figure out where the hell that soil's gone. Could some of it be in our Baylands? The NBC Bay Area Investigative News Report video, you see dump trucks shipping soil not clearly cleared for high radioactive levels on the soil with radium, cesium, and strontium because it was found out someone with the company at Tetra Tech rigged monitoring units or tampered them to allow 8.5 deviations above background instead of 6, a big difference in this area that allowed hot radioactive material to be dumped in so far undisclosed locations, which I can only speculate included the Baylands. How can the public trust that these private for-profit companies will not cut corners for profits when it comes to cleaning up the Baylands when we see reports like this of such gross violations? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Glenn Fieldman.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I will keep it brief. I would like to pick up on something that Anya Miller said a little while ago, and that is that we're expecting a lot of sea level rise in the Bay Area. An earlier speaker characterized the Baylands site and its remediation as routine, but I don't think he was considering the fact that this region with its toxic legacy pollutants is next to a bay that is going to steadily rise, and as it rises, the hydraulic pressure will also go up from the water, and we really don't know what is going to happen as far as seawater intrusion into the landfill and into the toxic waste. We really have no idea. I have access to an academic library, so I did a quick search. I found very little written about circumstances of this kind, and I think the council really has some more studying to do before making plans for this area. The second point with respect to sea level rise also relates to something Anya said, which is that there's going to be a lot of infrastructure relocation necessitated by sea level rise, including parts of 101. We keep hearing this is a Bay Area region. Yes, well, some of this infrastructure is also regional. And there's going to have to be a place to move some of the essential things that have to be gotten out of the bay as the bay goes up. So I think the council should be really careful about making plans to locate a lot of people on the Baylands for that, among other reasons. The third thing I would like to say, and I'd like to recommend to the council, is an article in the current issue of the magazine Mother Jones. We've heard a lot about the difficulty that lower income people, even middle income people now have buying housing in the Bay Area. And that's something I certainly sympathize with. I don't own a house. I can't afford to buy a house, and I will have to leave the Bay Area within a few years because I can't afford to live here. So I certainly sympathize with the sad stories of people who can't afford to buy housing in this area. But one thing I think we should realize, which is brought out in this article, is that people looking for a house in the Bay Area are not just in competition with each other. This is a global market that we're looking at. The Mother Jones article talks about the fact that Vancouver has experienced a horrendous housing shortage. Housing prices are out of reach of most of the citizenry, yet many, many houses, I believe the article said 30%, are vacant. And that is because tons of money from overseas are flooding into Vancouver and other cities on the West Coast. People are buying houses for speculation, or they're buying houses to have a safe landing spot if their countries implode. I'm talking about Russia, I'm talking about China, I'm talking about other places. And even though the number of people in those countries that can afford to buy a house overseas is a relatively small percentage of their population. The absolute numbers are large. I don't know of any study that's been done in the Bay Area that would indicate just how much housing in this region is owned by overseas people and currently not being used. And I certainly think that people who are worried about housing ought to put pressure on decision makers to find out, right? Because until we know that, we really don't know what the overall supply and demand situation for housing is in this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Michael Barnes.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Michael Barnes. I'm a Brisbane resident. To review existing conditions, in San Mateo County, 75% of our CO2 emissions are from transportation, which is not surprising. Since we have no services in Brisbane, we are forced to drive out of town for everything. Overall, 68% of all San Mateo County residents drive alone to work. Even without Baylands development, the 1994 General Plan traffic level of service will be exceeded in over 75% of studied intersections. But the 1994 General Plan is deeply flawed because it was written before we knew about climate change and how our driving contributes to climate change. It is clear that the General Plan must be changed. It has been under revision for at least 10 years. The 1994 General Plan also uses level of service instead of vehicle miles traveled as a measure of traffic impacts. Level of service is an antiquated and car-centric measure of transportation impacts. The state passed Steinberg's 2013 Senate Bill 743 to change CEQA traffic impacts from level of service to some other measure. Instead of measuring whether or not a project makes it less convenient to drive, it will measure, particularly within areas served by transit, how development promotes the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the development of multimodal transportation networks, and a diversity of land uses. Measurements of transportation impacts may include vehicle miles traveled per capita, automobile trip generation rates, or automobile trips generated. Currently, the San Mateo County daily vehicle miles traveled per capita is 22.85 miles. In San Francisco, it is less than half that. It is 10.75 miles. 42% of San Mateo County is protected open space. The Baylands are man-made land, not protected natural habitat or open space, so are suitable for development, and our 1994 General Plan allows for more development than the developer is proposing. The city now depends on income from garbage, dirt recycling, and gasoline pipelines. We should not perpetuate these sources of revenue. We can have better land uses in the Brisbane Baylands. Half of voters support housing in the Baylands per your city survey. In fact, the citizens of Brisbane designed a Baylands project in 2 workshops in 2007 that included housing, but the council removed housing from the citizens' preferred alternative. I like the citizens' plan, with maybe a little less retail, but with the housing. Back when the Northeast Ridge was under construction, fear in town ran high that they wouldn't be like us. But it turns out our neighbors on the Northeast Ridge are just as concerned about quality of life as Central Brisbane is, and they have fit in perfectly. The same will be true of Baylands residents. Either we or our parents moved here from someplace else, just as the residents of the Baylands will. I am not afraid of them usurping our control over Brisbane. This is the same argument that defeated the merging of the Brisbane and Bayshore elementary school districts, and now Brisbane schools will suffer the consequences. Don't make the same mistake twice. Mission Bay is a good local example of housing on an old rail yard. And since 78% of voters think you should work proactively with the developer, work with them on rail yard housing. I like the building massing of the citizens' preferred alternative rather than the developer's massing. I don't want a 24-hour-a-day rail yard in the Baylands that does not pay property taxes. I would like to see a truck stop near Highway 101. As we drive cars less, we'll be more dependent on truck delivery of goods to our homes, and truckers need to sleep. A couple of technical issues I'd like to address. The global warming, sea level rise, we have plenty of dirt out there. We can raise the level of the Baylands. San Francisco, people are concerned about open space and its maintenance and liability. San Francisco and the Schlag Lock site is requiring the developer to pay for open space maintenance even if the city owns the open space. As for pile driving, I work right next door to the Warriors Arena, and it is being built without pile driving. They are using augers and vibration. They've also used shoring and deep soil mixing in order to stabilize the site, and that is something that we use around the garbage dump as well. The Planning Commission proposal to create more jobs without housing is environmentally and socially and possibly economically unsustainable. Housing is a compatible use on the Baylands, as San Francisco is showing us. We need more homes on the peninsula, particularly for the very low and low income levels. Our general plan is far out of date. It does not address climate change or vehicle miles traveled. It has been under revision for at least 10 years. So please include a change to allow housing on the rail yard. Thank you.
Thank you. Evelyn Stivers.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Evelyn Stivers, and I'm with the Housing Leadership Council of San Mateo County. We work with communities and their leaders to create and preserve quality, affordable homes so people that grew up here and people that want to work here have an opportunity to live in this great, this great county. I just wanted to address a couple quick things. Before the housing boom that is so often, we often talk about it, where we added 60,000 jobs and only 2,800 homes. We already had a shortfall of housing in San Mateo County. We had about 60,000 people driving in every day for work to this county. And the shortfall was especially bad for affordable housing. We had a gap of about 25,000 affordable homes that we had not built. That's worse than our neighboring counties. We actually have a smaller per capita build of affordable housing than Santa Clara, San Mateo, even Marin. That's embarrassing. What does this cause? This causes terrible, terrible traffic. It's also causing shortfalls in some very important jobs. The hospital is having a really hard time finding qualified doctors that are willing to live in San Mateo County and pay the exorbitant costs we have for housing. We're having trouble finding firefighters, police officers, EMTs. So for all of the emergencies that we are concerned about, we need to make sure that we have adequate housing. And it wasn't some crazy plot that caused the shortfall. It was individual councils, much like yourselves, very concerned about the quality of life in your community and more concerned with what new housing would bring than what new jobs would bring. And making the decision to allow new jobs and to allow new retail without building enough housing. So I'm asking you, I know I can feel the fear in this room when people talk about building housing. And I understand it is difficult to make a decision to increase the size of your city this much. But please work with us to solve the concerns and the problems. We've been working since the housing community has been working since the 80s to overcome problems with brownfields. We can solve those problems. And we can make sure and give you the assurances that you need to feel comfortable with it. But for the environment, for our traffic, for our kids, for the quality of life in this county, please work with us and get to yes to housing on this site. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Evan Siraki.
Hello?
You can move the microphone up.
Oh, yeah. I am Evan Soroki. I'm here out on my own accord, not paid or anything. I did get a free burrito, but that's it. I'm here to talk about the housing thing. It's a regional problem, and I live in Santa Cruz County, and I know of someone who commutes all the way to South San Francisco every work day. And so you have a huge opportunity to build 4,400 housing units out here. And you guys are within a 5-mile radius of 650,000 jobs. But of those jobs, only or 15% of those workers commute over 50 miles to go home. So please approve this housing. It's a great opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. My apologies if I can't get this name right. It looks like Jab Wheel. Okay. Please correct me. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I come to you from San Francisco, and I understand that having this many people come in from out of town all at once may be somewhat overwhelming. But I feel like it is important for me to show up here because I have heard in the past about the question of if a lot of commercial space is to be built in this location, where are people supposed to live? I have heard it suggested, and I understand that this was possibly maybe partially unjust, but at the same time there was clearly an underlying truth to it that these people were all supposed to live in San Francisco. I live in San Francisco. San Francisco is a city where I believe currently the median new lease on an apartment is about $3,500. If every city in the Bay Area decides that they should build office space but they should not build housing, something does not add up. I have heard a lot of very curious theories about economics today. Especially curious to me because I studied economics, I got a degree in it, I even published a couple of papers in it. I heard that if you have more of something, the prices go up. I suppose that is why gold is very cheap and dirt is very expensive. I just wanted to take a minute and then I'll yield my time about what actually happens when everybody builds office space but not housing. Because people do have to live somewhere. I used to live in East Palo Alto, and I could afford to buy a house for myself in East Palo Alto. But some of my neighbors live 3 or 4 families to a house. And that's the reality we live in the Bay Area at this point. I can afford to live next to a train station and commute to an office that's also next to a train station. But I know people who are not so fortunate. For example, somebody that works in my apartment building that I spoke to recently says, yes, I live in Sacramento. I sleep on a friend's couch sometimes so that I don't have to go all the way back to Sacramento every day. And these are the kinds of situations that you create when every city says, sure, we need housing, but not in my town. And I know that a lot of people will say that, well, our town is in some way special, and I understand. I mean, I think my town is special. And I'm from a place halfway across the world, a place that used to have a coal mine until it didn't. Very different from here. But I can honestly tell you that no matter where you go in the Bay Area, everybody says that there should be housing some other place. Because, well, we have too much nature to protect, or we have too many roads here, or not enough roads here, or something or other. And in the end, what it all adds up to is people having to move out of the area. I know that the people that currently live in Brisbane probably mostly own their houses, are not directly affected by that, but I would like to urge the council to please think beyond the city line. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lori, do you mind if we take a quick break?
Sure, that's fine. We still have a number of slips. I'm not sure we're going to get through them all. So let's take a 5-minute break. Thank you.